Right, James, when we initially started this podcast a few weeks ago, we said we wanted to cover a wide scope of subjects, and today I think it would be fair to say it's perhaps one of the darker roads we're going down so far, and we're happy to be joined by Alana Goodman. Alana, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me on.
And obviously you're here to talk about your new book. Would you be able to discuss a wee bit about that?
Yes, yeah. So our book, A Convenient Death, The Mysterious Demise of Jeffrey Epstein. I wrote this with my co-author, Daniel Halper, and our book looks at two main issues. The first one is we investigate the very bizarre circumstances leading up to Jeffrey Epstein's death in prison last summer, and the questions about whether foul play was involved. And second, we looked at Epstein's powerful network of friends, which included Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Victoria's Secret billionaire Leslie Wexner, a lot of very wealthy and powerful people, spanning across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, just from my own perspective, obviously it's came out, you've got the Netflix documentary as well, Filthy Rich, on the same subject. Was that just coincidence that you two had this stuff out at the same time?
Just a coincidence, yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people have obviously watched that documentary. It's one of the trending topics on there just now, and obviously your book will provide good insight onto that topic as well. And for those who don't know who Jeffrey Epstein is, could you sort of fill them in on who he was?
Yeah, he was a very, very wealthy financier in the United States, and he flew under the radar for a little while, but his friendships with politicians, especially Bill Clinton, kind of put him on the national stage, and there started being national news coverage of him. He was arrested last year for sex trafficking, running a massive sex trafficking operation of minors. And this was going back to, early 2000s. And it's a major, major case, that probably one of the biggest crime cases in America last summer.
When the initial cases were, or accusations in the 90s, that's when people started to perhaps realise there's maybe something going on there, and perhaps there was a wee bit more potential.
There were accusations going back to the 1990s, but he actually was not, this didn't come out publicly that he was doing this until like the mid-2000s, like 2006 and 2007. He was arrested for the first time. So that was really when people in his circle, they would have no excuse to not have known about what was going on after 2007.
After the initial charges and convictions going back to the mid-2000s, you would think that given the kind of the severity of what happened, that a lot of these powerful friends would have quickly vanished to preserve their own reputations. But obviously that's not what happened. We've seen that he continued to have links with a lot of prominent people well after that. Why do you think that is? Do you think people weren't as bothered about the guilt by association almost?
I think there's a few reasons for that. I mean, number one, the guy had a lot of money. So he was able to kind of buy his way into these, especially with academic circles. I mean, academics are always looking for funding and things like that for their projects. And so he was able to kind of insinuate himself into the circles in that way. Also, a lot of people liked going around with somebody who has a private airplane and his own islands, things like that. And in addition to that, he was also extremely charming and persuasive and charismatic. And so he was able to con people. And I think that we saw that with, the famous picture of Prince Andrew walking with him. And that was well after his first arrest on this. So yeah, I think he was just able to keep people in his life that way. And there's also, he was also had his house in New York was completely wired up with cameras. So that's another thing. People say, what dirt could he have had on these very powerful people that would have kept them in his orbit?
Then fast forwarding on, there was then the second set of charges, which was the ones that really caught public attention and finished him off, for want of a better word. Just kind of explain to us the chain of events through that leading up to his death.
Yeah, so he was arrested last summer for sex trafficking, and he was sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center. So that's the prison in New York, the federal prison. And he was there awaiting charges when he was found dead in his cell in August. And that was after he had been in jail for about 2 months at that point. And it was just absolutely shocking because he was the most high profile prisoner who was in that facility at the time. And there was a lack of camera footage from what happened. The camera in his cell, there's supposed to be a camera in each cell. That was not working. They weren't able to get the video for whatever reason. The two guards who were supposed to be checking on him had not checked on him for hours since the prior evening. He was found in the morning around 6 a.m. And they had falsified records saying that they were checking on him every 30 minutes when they hadn't been. So it was just a really shocking case on how could the federal government have let this guy die in custody while he was awaiting trial on such massive charges, and something that was such a had so much media attention and was such a major story in the US.
Where then did his death kind of grab your interest and prompt you to investigate into this book?
I think it's just such a mystery. You know, there was so much. Most people know the name Jeffrey Epstein when they hear it, but there are so many questions about him, his life, and his death as well that we just didn't have any answers to. I mean, basic things like, where did this guy make his money? You know, where did he come from? How did he befriend all of these very wealthy, powerful people? And then also what happened with his death. I mean, a lot of people questioned it. They said that, so it was the New York medical examiner said that it was a suicide. But there were a lot of people who were questioning that and saying, it sounds like there could have been foul play involved. There are a lot of people who might want this guy dead because he has potentially incriminating information on them. So it was just the biggest mystery in the US at that point. And my co-author and I wanted to look into it and see what we could dig up.
See, John, when you said that obviously the coroner said it was a suicide, was there ever any other investigations into that, a second opinion?
So the Department of Justice has been prosecuting the 2 prison guards for falsifying documents and saying that they had been checking on him. So that is something that is ongoing. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the case was basically essentially closed with the New York medical examiner. We haven't heard anything really else from the Department of Justice about what happened that night. And that was one of the big concerns when I spoke to Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark. He said that, you know, he's just been stonewalled by the federal government on this while trying to get information on his brother. Epstein's legal team wanted to get medical records, camera footage, various things. They wanted to get information from other prisoners who were on his cell block that night, who were dispersed as soon as his body was found. They wanted to know if those people had been interviewed and what they might have to say about the situation. And they said that they were blocked really at every turn by the Department of Justice, which told them, you know, there's this ongoing investigation into the prison guards. I mean, for me as a reporter, I do know that this is something that the federal government has done on other occasions where it's like they're carrying on some sort of investigation related to the issue, and so they shut down any sort of inquiries into, you know, they say, you can't have public access to this information because we have an ongoing investigation. So it's very frustrating, and I really do think that and hope that the federal government will be more transparent on this.
Also, the completed suicide, which apparently did kill Epstein. And that wasn't the first incident involving him, was it?
It wasn't. So about 2 weeks prior to this, he had been on suicide watch for another incident where it is unclear exactly what happened. The prison said that he had tried to commit suicide, and that incident as well. His attorney told me that this was some sort of prank gone wrong. He wouldn't provide any more details in addition to that, but he said, we can assure you it was not a suicide attempt. It was something completely different, I guess, I don't involving his cellmate at the time. So that's a little bit muddled too. And I think that what would be good to see on that is medical evidence from the prison, from the federal prison, saying like what actually happened in that prior attempt, because the footage of that the video footage from that incident had also been lost, and so we aren't able to see what happened.
It's just so strange, this case, isn't it? Obviously, the public, this in today's age more than ever, want information. So for so much of what's there to be shut off, I think perhaps that's one of the reasons why the public have been so interested, because it has been so shrouded in mystery.
Yes, it's absolutely. There's still a lot of questions, and even after we spent a lot of time on this book and talking to people around the case and talking to a lot of people involved, and there's still lingering questions from it. I mean, this is something that we might never know the actual answer to what happened that night.
What were some of the main takeaways you got from researching the book and investigating Epstein's death?
Well, when I went into it, I was very skeptical of, I guess, the public skepticism over his death. Like I was like, the guy was facing an enormous prison sentence. I mean, spending the rest of his life in prison. He was used to a very luxurious lifestyle, and like, it kind of makes sense that he would want to kill himself, because he was facing down this very long road. I was surprised as we started looking into it how many people around him and around the case believed that he was killed. And I guess one of the biggest surprises was when I talked to guards who had worked at that facility, who said it would have been extremely difficult for him to have killed himself in this way without any help. And said outright, this sounds fishy, and it sounds like this could have been murder. I was surprised by that. Friends of Epstein's who said, absolutely not. This guy would never kill himself. Like, he just was not. It was would have been totally out of character for him. He was, a very kind of narcissistic type guy. He was convinced that his wealth could buy him out of a lot of things, and he believed he had a good case. And to be honest, a lot of people don't look at it this way, because he was such an odious person, and what he did was so horrific. But from a legal standpoint, he did have a decent case, and he also had a dream team of lawyers and basically unlimited resources to throw at it. So yeah, I guess that was my biggest takeaway, just the idea that there could have been foul play involved, and it wasn't something that we were able to dismiss during our investigation.
And it also almost sounds as though the biggest red flag for you was the fact that who Epstein was and the lifestyle that he had, away from the criminality side of it, kind of makes it really difficult to believe that he could have killed himself. But kind of looking at the flip side of that, with his friends saying that it's very much out of character for him. Mm-hmm. Would these not friends also said that abusing children was very much out of character for him as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously he was a guy who had secrets and kept secrets. So, but I will also add to that, he he was the last hours of his life, he was spending meeting with his lawyers. He was very fired up during this last meeting. He was very, obviously he didn't want to be charged and have to deal with defending himself in this case, but he was very willing to defend himself, and he was enthusiastic about fighting the charges. So he also had a bail appeal that was coming up as well. So his legal team was just totally baffled by this, and they said, why would he do it at this moment? One interesting theory that we discuss in the book is that it comes from a friend of Ghislaine Maxwell's, who had also spent time at MCC, which was the prison where Epstein was. And she said that when she was there, she had, and this was years prior, but she had attempted suicide while she was at the prison, and they ended up transferring her to like a hospital facility, which was a lot better. And she told me that she mentioned this to Ghislaine on the phone after Epstein was sent to MCC. So what this woman told me was that she thinks that it's possible that Epstein could have been trying to get transferred to another facility. He didn't intend to actually go through with the suicide completely. He just wanted to be found that way, by the guards before he was able to do it. And of course, the guards did not check on him at the time they were supposed to be checking on him. So she thinks it could have been something like that was accidental. People have a lot of different theories on this case, but I think that is an interesting one. I'll also note, the pictures from the room, he had either pulled or somebody had pulled the mattress off of the top bunk of the bed and put it on the floor. And my co-author and I wondered about that, on why would the mattress be on the floor? If he was in terms of this accidental death theory, the mattress could have been on the floor potentially for his knees. That would be an uncomfortable position to be kneeling in, with a rope around your neck and leaning forward. So could have been something like that.
Looking at some of the prominent people that have been linked to Epstein, just kind of, who exactly are we sort of talking about here?
Two presidents, so Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, and many, many academics and well-known people in the United States. Noam Chomsky hung out with him. He said that he didn't see any issues when I talked to him. He said, it was really just academic, and we met at like academic meetings and things like that. But yeah, he was around a lot of well-known people. His relationship with Bill Clinton was very interesting, and we spend a chapter in our book talking about that, because both Clinton and Trump have downplayed their friendship with him, although both of them had a closer relationship with Epstein than they have acknowledged. So Bill Clinton, for example, Epstein had a direct line to him going back to when he was in the White House in the 1990s. There was one party that Bill Clinton attended on Martha's Vineyard at the house of Caroline Kennedy. And at one point, one of the Secret Service agents came in and tapped him on the shoulder and said, Mr. President, you have a phone call, you had a cell phone call. And it was Jeffrey Epstein. And he stepped outside and he took the call for like 10 minutes and then walked back into the party. Epstein was just able to call up the President of the United States. It's pretty powerful. We also reported that Clinton had been in a relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. And according to our source, and that's why he and Epstein were actually hanging around each other so much, was because it was kind of a good cover for Clinton to be around Ghislaine. Ghislaine Maxwell was Epstein's longtime girlfriend, and on and off again girlfriend, and someone who was allegedly involved in helping him recruit these underage girls. So she's definitely, she's a person of interest in the case.
She's another. On you go, James. On you go.
We've seen Prince Andrew's involvement in the request for him to come over to be questioned. How is that appearing from the other side of the Atlantic? Is it kind of looking as suspicious as it does over here?
Well, I would love for Prince Andrew to be questioned by the feds, and I know I think there was a story last week or in the last couple of weeks on that, where he had been asked to come in for questioning, and the U.S. said that he wasn't cooperating or whatever. I mean, I look, they were very close. He was close with Epstein going back to the 1990s and Ghislaine Maxwell. And I think he would be somebody who would certainly have information that would be of interest to this case. Absolutely. So it's I do hope that he cooperates, and I hope that they are able to question him.
There was one interview he did, I think, last year with the BBC over here, where he was questioned on it, and to say his performance on it was sketchy would probably be putting it lightly.
It was an awful interview from a public relations standpoint, and I don't even understand why he agreed to do it, but it was it made it so much worse.
See,
and he has it, like, I mean, because there have been accusations against other, powerful men and political figures. But with Andrew, there's actually a photograph of him with Virginia Giuffre, who's one of Epstein's, one of the women who accused Epstein of, sexually assaulting her when she was underage. And she has also accused Prince Andrew of it. But when you have that photographic evidence, of them together, and it's not a good situation for him. I think that was the big issue. And then also him being pictured with Epstein after finding out, like after it was publicly known that Epstein was involved with underage girls. I just don't understand what he was thinking or what kind of judgment he had at that point.
No, there needed to be some sort of like strong condemnation of it. And there just wasn't. It was just sort of like, just sort of humming and hawing over it. And
yeah,
I don't know if that's because, like you said, there was sort of like photographs of him with Epstein and things like that, but there just didn't seem to be really any stance on it. It was just nothing.
Yeah, no, it was shocking.
With another one obviously mentioned is Trump, and there's a quote from him sort of early 2000s. I've not got have you got the quote to hand, James?
I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy, a lot of fun to be with. Stephen said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. I mean, obviously, with hindsight, that's a very suspicious quote. But do you feel there's almost a kind of an element that it was hiding in plain sight?
I mean, Epstein was known to be with young women. That was, I mean, what I was told by people who were associates of his was they didn't know how young these were. He would show up to a party with, he's a man in his 50s and 60s, whatever, show up to a party with an 18, 19-year-old model, I mean, some people might look at that and say that's odd, but it's not, there's nothing illegal about that. But what people claim was that they didn't realize that there were girls who were even younger than that. In Donald Trump's case, it was actually, we talked to the director of a beauty pageant that had worked with Trump at his hotels. And it was called the American Dreams pageant. And this beauty pageant director was invited to bring the girls to Mar-a-Lago for a party by Donald Trump. So Mar-a-Lago is Donald Trump's place in Palm Beach. So the girls went over, they had this party, and according to the beauty pageant director, he said that the featured male guest at this party was Jeffrey Epstein. And he was absolutely furious at Trump for bringing Epstein to the party, because the pageant director said that he had banned him from his pageants previously, because Epstein had been coming on to the contestants. And he said some of these girls, some of these contestants were as young as 15 years old. So he was really appalled when he was at this party, and it kind of appeared to be like a setup situation for Epstein to come and take his pick of whatever girls he wanted from there. But I thought that was a very interesting story. We were also told that when Trump did eventually cut ties with Epstein, and this was after Epstein came on to a daughter of a Mar-a-Lago member, and Trump found out and was upset by that, and he didn't like anything kind of getting in the way of his business. So that was when he cut ties with Epstein, and that was prior to the early 2000s charges.
Well, as well as that, just with the victims as well, I think one of the key profiles of them, they were from some of them at least were from sort of less privileged backgrounds. So it was sort of people who perhaps had a hard upbringing or were finding things tight, and he was offering them a couple £100 to come in. And that was sort of how he was getting his victims in, as well as from the sort of upper brass of society.
Yes. Yeah, it was sort of like this sexual pyramid scheme. It was absolutely horrible, because he would pay he would pay other girls to recruit their friends and bring them in, and when their friends would come, they'd get a cut of the payment or whatever. So it was very sick the way that this was set up.
Obviously, there's lots of names out there, people who have been connected with Epstein. Was there any point where you got surprised just by kind of how wide his network was? I mean, I've got a list of some of the people here. We've got Mohammed bin Salman, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jess Staley, Les Wexner, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker. I mean, that's a wide scope of people.
Yes. It was Bill Gates. I mean, it's just so many people. Woody Allen. I mean, it was amazing how many people were in his network and how many people knew him. And he was able to kind of like buy his way into these friendships, and it's really shocking.
It is quite amazing, really, like how these very powerful people obviously have got brains, and like this, obviously, I think he's been described as almost like a professional conman throughout his full life, that he was able to manipulate these people who, not saying they obviously had knowledge of what he was doing, but he was able to get into their circles and then sort of make his way around them and make himself sort of the top man almost.
Yeah. I spoke to one of his bosses, his early bosses, back from when he was involved in finance. The guy's name is Stephen Hoffenberg, and he told me that Jeffrey Epstein was the biggest manipulator he had ever met. He said that he had this kind of gift of seeing your weakness and was able to use that to his advantage, and kind of tell you what you wanted to hear. And Stephen Hoffenberg himself spent many years in prison for running a massive Ponzi scheme. So he would know manipulators, I think. And he said that he was amazed by Epstein's abilities on this. And that was back when Epstein would have been in his 30s, so really starting out in finance.
Yeah, there was points as well where I think he lied about his qualifications and things to get into certain jobs as well, sort of in his early finance days, and like even when he was found out, he was able to sort of battle back and say, well, I should still be here for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, he was very, very charming. I mean, and an intelligent guy, but did not graduate from college, but he wanted a very different lifestyle than the one that he was raised with. And I think that is kind of an important part of the story too. Like he grew up in an immigrant family in Coney Island. They were lower middle class or lower class. They did not have a lot of money for anything other than basic necessities. And when he grew up, he wanted to be a completely different person. He wanted to be a baller. He wanted to be somebody who had private planes and all the money that he wanted. He also, if you look at pictures of him from when he was younger, when he was a kid and in his teens, he was a really chubby looking kid. He became, as an adult, kind of this obsessive about exercising and eating. Like he was, I mean, Alan Dershowitz, who was his longtime lawyer and friend, spoke to him, and he said he like would never see Jeffrey Epstein eating ever. The guy like never ate, and he worked out all the time. And I just feel like there's a lot of this that was kind of a rebellion against like how he was in his youth. One of the more interesting things I was told by another longtime friend of his was that Epstein did not do well with girls when he was in high school. And this friend felt that what Epstein was doing to underage girls was to get back at basically all the 15-year-olds who spurned him when he was a teen, which is really sick and weird, but gives you kind of, I guess, some insight into the kind of personality that he was.
He very much sounds like someone who spent his entire life building up capital to use against other people. So when it comes to his death, it sounds as though there could very well be like a lot of people who've got skeletons that could come out. But given his notoriety as a prisoner, his wealth, just a general statesman who's supposed to be on suicide watch, and how high does it have to go that someone could kill him in those circumstances? And we're not talking that it can just be a low-level associate of his.
Yeah, it would have been, I mean, that it would have been very difficult too. I mean, and what the Epstein's legal team hired a forensic pathologist to oversee his autopsy, and oversee the government's autopsy of him. And this guy, his name is Dr. Michael Bodden, and he's well-known TV. He's been on various TV shows and things like that. I spoke to him about this. He thinks that the physical evidence is more consistent with homicide than with suicide. But I said to him, what could have happened in this case? Like, walk me through how a murder, like if he was murdered, how would it have happened here? And he said, well, it could have been somebody on his cell block, whose door is left open, and Epstein's door is left open, and it happens that way. A lot of things happen in prison. People are killed in prison. And Michael Bodden is, he works a lot within the prison system. He's been on a board for going back to the 1970s in New York that has reviewed, it's a governor appointed board, and it's reviewed every prison death that takes place in state-run prisons, to make sure that there's no sort of foul play involved from the guards or anything like that. And he said of the suicides that he's looked at over the years from prisoners, he's never seen one that has the physical evidence that was in Epstein's case. Namely, he said he's never seen one where there were 3 broken bones in the neck from different places, which was the cartilage and the hyoid, left and right cartilage and the hyoid bone. He said he's seen the hyoid broken in some cases, but he has never had a case where it's been all 3. So he was surprised by that. He said it was more consistent with more of like a manual strangulation in his mind.
I think that was one of the things as well, that strangulation was mentioned because there were problems with the evidence regarding the rope that he was supposed to have hung himself with as well.
Yes, and this is something that Epstein's brother Mark also brought up to me. So he was able to get photographs of like the crime scene and different like medical evidence, such as the noose that he supposedly used to hang himself. And it is interesting, and you can look at the picture yourself, it's online, but the news, there's blood. You can see that there's blood on Epstein's neck. There doesn't appear to be any blood on that noose. And Dr. Bodden also said the noose doesn't appear to be consistent, like shape-wise, with the ligature mark that was around Epstein's neck. So that is interesting as well. What his brother Mark raised to me was that one of the prison guards who found Epstein said that he had cut him down when he found him hanging from his top bunk. And if you look at that picture of the noose, it does not appear to be cut in any place. It's actually hemmed if you look at it on all sides. So that definitely raises questions as well. Was that, how do they know that was the noose that he used? Are they absolutely certain that it was? And yeah, I mean, the evidence just doesn't seem to be consistent.
It's very, very odd, all these things, I think. I think you could sort of be here for a long time going, well, this could happen, this isn't right. I mean, in these cases, do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of it, or do you think it's just so shrouded in mystery that we're going to be here for it?
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know. I think that it would be great if we could have some more transparency from the federal government on this. I think that they could do a lot to clear up the questions that we have by releasing the medical evidence, releasing any interviews that they've had with people who were actually on his cell block and could have heard or witnessed something that night. And any sort of video footage that they have, although obviously a lot of it has been missing. So yeah, it would be great to have answers. I just don't know if it's going to happen. I think this might be one of those mysteries, like, that comes up, like the Kennedy assassination and Princess Diana, that people just talk about for, decades to come.
Yeah, well, that was what you're obviously, I think, a bit older than me. I mean, this is sort of the first time in my 18 years that I've seen a court case or a legal case of this magnitude. Was there anything sort of before this that can even compare? Because I think the one thing for me, it might be a bit of an odd comparison. When I was obviously listening to your audiobook and watching the documentary, was almost a bit similar to the R. Kelly stuff that had been going on. It was from bit of hard upbringing and was underage girls and was using his power to exploit them. I mean,
yeah,
it's all very similar.
Yeah, but even in that case, I mean, Epstein, I think it's his ties to the political establishment that are just so shocking. The fact that he was friends with two presidents, friends with Prince Andrew. I don't know if there's anything, I can't think of anything really that is comparable to this, but it's a fascinating case, and we will see what happens with the prison guards, because as I said, they've been charged, and I think the trial for them is scheduled for I think next fall. So
are you sort of still planning to keep up to date with this case? Obviously you've got the one book out now, but I'm assuming you obviously with your career you'll be continuing to watch it with a keen eye.
Yeah, absolutely. I have not seen the full Netflix documentary yet, but I am planning to watch that. And I know Investigative Discovery, I think they have a documentary as well. And yeah, I'm just going to be following any updates on it as they come.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through the Netflix documentary. You're just watching some of it and it's just like, wow, like any other person doesn't get away with that for me. You know what I mean? Because he obviously had a good friends in high places.
Friends in high places, great lawyers. Epstein had great lawyers. I mean, Alan Dershowitz, one of the top constitutional lawyers of all time. I mean, he was O.J. Simpson's attorney. I mean, really, Epstein had just a dream team of attorneys throughout his life.
James, have you got anything to add?
No, I'm good. That's fine for me.
Alana, thanks very much for joining us. Obviously, a very interesting topic. I'm sure we'll all sort of follow it as it proceeds over the months and years, probably. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Alana's book, Convenient Death, we'll leave links to that so you can go and purchase it in the description. And until next time, take it easy.